Okay, you heard that?
I did hear that, but
Oh,
let me get my microphone because I believe this is better when it comes to like recording.
yes, and I have to buy like a microphone too.
Yeah,
I, but once I get a little more financially like just able to get it because I know what it is. I know I can get it up at the Apple store.
yep,
Yeah. So the reason I think this is a significant jump in people listening to my podcast because like other times I don't talk about my personal life like I've
yeah,
usually been saying, oh, like my personal life around Nathan chasing horse, blah 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 blah, and then now I'm just like talking about like the things I've had to live through in my community, like policies, like I said, I helped do the first proposals for the first daycare and the first detox treatment center, all voluntary, all under the premise that if I finished it, not that anybody told me, I just thought, oh, I'll be creative and do this, and then once I get the money, once the money comes into to the nation, then I could ask to see if I could be the janitor and stay in the homes, in the
yeah,
basement as the janitor looking after facilities. And each time they said no because I was a single female. And then I think after I think I was 25 when I did the one for the detox treatment center, and then they created a policy that uh, a woman who had no children and single could not apply for a house in her community in housing because we don't own our own homes, right?
right.
Until we're 55 years old, with no children.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
I
go ahead.
anyway, I have lots to say about that because like in the urban setting, um I've I've seen a lot of the moms who were my daughter's I guess my demographic, but my daughter's age.
Yeah.
As soon as my daughter and their kids turned 18, their rents went up immediately, and because there is an expectation that somehow an 18-year-old who may still be in high school is somehow going to be making, an extra $500 a month or something. And in some cases, the moms lost the housing because the kid turned 18. Um, so like that really upsets me because I don't understand how cruel the system is to get rid of people like that. And that's just the urban um experience. I can't imagine on the res what they're doing.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I like and again too, like, when we're talking about children who age out too, that's in the same realm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why like how prepared. Well, let me put it this way: I'm not comparing apples and oranges. It may sound like it, but I do know when my brother was in prison and he was released. They give hardly anything for prisoners who are released to like pay rent, like to find a place where they're going to stay. And
Mm,
he made a comment like he had like he was in a partner with a company, so he had income, but he made a comment that if he didn't have that, he would have been homeless.
yeah. Isn't that wild?
Yes, and even like because I mean, like homeless. I mean when I ran away to Vancouver, I was 17 and I turned 18 in Vancouver, and I just happened, I don't know how the hell, I swear creator's been watching me and guiding me. I walked into an Indian Friendship Center, and the lady there just met the executive, didn't even know who who what where and anything. They were moving into this new building on Vine Street and Fourth, and she, I must have looked so pitiful and homeless because she says, I can help you out. Sit down, filled out the form, drove me to a halfway house where there were women, like young women like myself. I think the youngest was 15. And
Mm,
the head mother was like 25 or 30. And
yeah.
she'd been on the streets, and these girls had been lived quite rough lives, and I'd only been in Vancouver, I'll say maybe 5 months by then.
Yeah.
And uh, it was really scary because the 15-year-old was like 8 months pregnant. The older
Uh,
woman who was 24, she'd had many children that she had given up for adoption. It and the head woman, she was like a former prostitute. And one of the ladies, she was like, these were good looking, attractive women,
sure.
girls. Okay, the one of them said, "I'm going to go visit my boyfriend. Do you want to come with me?" Didn't know nothing about Hastings, nothing. Went with her. Went up this this stairwell that was creepy, like I'm talking about Halloween creepy. Knocked on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
door, and this guy opens the door, and he's this Sasquatch of a man. Like, I'm just going, what? Like, scared the bejesus out of me. And she says, "Do you want to come in?" And I'm going, "No, I'm going." I just thought, oh my goodness. In hindsight, I'm going, oh my goodness.
No
Like,
thanks.
just like these girls were. I kid you not. I Even as an elder, I remember meeting one lady, and I won't say her name, okay, because I
Sure.
know you know her, and she committed suicide.
Hmm.
She I think she became two spirited. She'd had a child, and
Mm,
businesswoman, and I had an opportunity to sit down with her and talk to her, and she was talking about the violence of her that her dad and her brother inflicted on both her and her mother,
mm,
like you being chased down the stairs in their home, just like the threat of it. Like, sometimes when people talk to me about their violent experience, it just takes my breath away,
yeah.
because they've lived through it, and that's part of their memory. That's part of their
Yeah.
history. So, when I look back at those young women that I met in Vancouver, I years later I saw one of them at Calgary, the 24-year-old, and
Mm,
she looked just spent. Just She had put on maybe 100 pounds. Just She was hitchhiking to Toronto, I think, like very
oh,
lost.
sure.
And I had when I came back from Vancouver, my cousins, like in what do you call it, in white man's words, my second cousins. They were my dad's first cousins' children. They took off to Vancouver,
Mm,
but they got in trouble with the law, and they when they came back, they were talking about welfare fraud. I swear I was so naive about crime.
well, but that's kind of how it works, is that, you when you're young and you don't know anything and you're like in abject poverty, it's really easy to fall into it and not know. So, I don't know. It's very interesting to me because like you try to do the right thing and apply for the jobs, et cetera, and the white people go, "Oh, we don't like natives," and lose your resume,
Yeah,
which is
and then
disappointing.
and then
Yeah.
where do you get if you have, like, my cousins had children too. The older one had
Mm,
5 kids, and the rest didn't have any children. But it was the scam, and how they cheated the welfare system. They ended up serving time. I mean, I'm just telling the story, like, so that people know, like, crime doesn't. There's no benefit in crime, but like, I remember too. I had run away with high risk teenagers from Calgary. See, again, my parents, like, when I talk about high risk teenagers,
yeah.
like parents, like, for me, my parents, because they were raised in residential school, and because we're right by the city, th- we I think it was that, what do they, not fawning, maybe it's fawning, where you don't want to cause any problems. But for my parents, even when it came to white friends, it was like they were untouchable, like they're holy, they're that privilege, or like they're better off, even if they're high risk teenagers. See, that's the mythology of it too, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't think that white people have some behavioral problems with their kids, or that they've committed incest with their children. because I'm pretty sure that the one of the lady that she was high risk, met her in high school at Lord Beaverbrook. I'm pretty sure she was a victim of incest, and she had been um, um, living at William Roper Hall home. See,
Oh,
again, too, I didn't know about high risk behavior.
sure.
And even like when I got a job in Utah with high risk teenagers, it wasn't the same as William Roper Hall home. The youth that I was looking after were under lock and key. They were under
Mm,
psychiatric and psychologists and therapists, teachers, everything. They had trained professionals. They were under lock and key for their own, for their, so they wouldn't kill themselves.
yeah.
And there were also like different units. This was at the state hospital where they had units that were there for people who had addiction problems. There was also one house unit that was there for the criminally insane. Like this, the diversity of people, and also working with other people, like that were working in different units.
Yeah.
Just that in itself, especially like, here I am, a little country bumpkin from a small 1 million, back in the day, it wasn't a million population, but I go smack
No.
dam in the middle of Utah, with a high dense population. Just, it was a cultural shock. But again, I survived it. But for me, the reality of what I saw and who I saw, and even taking courses like learning about multiple personality disorders, just things in general, because at the point of the mountain, which is like Salt Lake City was an hour north of where I lived, and there was a penitentiary there. Like it was notorious. I worked in a dorm. I can't remember the guy's name. He was a serial killer. That in 1976, when I was there, a couple of blocks away, he went to a motel, executed, killed the night attendant in front of his wife and children, pers- shot him, like he had him kneel down and shot him in the back of the head, took off up
Oh my
State Street
gosh.
to Orem, Utah, went to a service station, got the service station attendant out. The service station attendant was a student. He was in law school. Executed, killed him, executed style. They caught
Oh
him,
my gosh.
put him at the point of the mountain, and so I was living like in the area, and so it was all like, oh my goodness, there's a serial killer. Blah, like in Canada, in Calgary, like, hey, like they don't. The news isn't as dynamic as it was then. This was like in the 70s. So here
Yeah.
I am. I went back to Utah, and I got a job, like I said, at the state hospital. And the history, apparently the fellow who had done all this killing, he had been charged. He had been given the death penalty, and so he chose to be executed by firing squad. Now,
We're talking about Gary Gilmore. I'm
is
looking it up. It's
okay.
Gary Gilmore is his name.
Yes,
So
yes, yeah,
you're right. And you're right about he being executed by firing squad.
yes.
You're
So
right.
so while he was there, he had his girlfriend come, and she'd visit him, and she brought stuff in for him to commit suicide. I don't know, it was pills or what, but they caught her,
Wild.
and because she was a minor. Get this, like she was a minor. They
Of
they they
course.
put her in the state hospital on the ward where I was going to work years later. So
Yeah.
that was the history of the dorm that I was working on. That this young woman who had been the girlfriend, the partner of Gary Gilmore, uh, had been housed there for treatment, because again, she became suicidal. Because I mean,
Yeah.
nobody on that dorm would be in there, say, for alcohol or drug abuse or depression. Well, of course, part of it could be depression too, but I'm talking about extreme behavior, that like that. How did one psychologist put it? She says, when you're talking about when you're self-analyzing yourself as being borderline or schizophrenic or bipolar, she says, no, 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 no. Don't ever self-analyze yourself. And she gave examples of, how extreme behavior is. So that's what I'm talking about. The teenagers had extreme behavior that I
Yeah.
supervised. But apparently, she ended. See, when somebody is successful in killing themselves, like nobody talks about it. It's not published, nothing. But I don't even know that young woman's name. But she ended up killing herself on that dorm.
Wow.
See, and for me, that was really like a very stressful job. I had to make
Yep.
sure, those girls, like even if they tried hurting themselves, it was constant, constant watching them. And
Mm.
but yeah, there was also, while I was working there, there was a young woman. I shouldn't say young woman. She was a child. She
Can
was
I just say, I think her name is Nicole Baker.
oh, the one who his girlfriend, his partner, his
Yeah. Yeah.
oh
Yeah. Because it says here, so it's an article from the LA Times, and it's 10 years later,
yeah.
and it says um, that a friend found Nicole Baker comatose in her apartment. She was committed to a mental hospital after the execution. Gilmore, more easily revived, tried suicide again a month before his execution. Anyway, so I think they named her, and
Okay.
I think her name was Nicole Baker.
Oh, well, that's where she was institutionalized, on the dorm where I eventually ended up working on
There you go.
history. And people wonder, what kind of life did I live? Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes.
No, there was
I
one.
should
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
I was I was going to say I should watch One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because back in the 70s it was not a nice time. And I know Stanley Kubrick like tried to encapsulate that ugliness, but I was talking to another elder who I won't name because I don't have their permission, but they were
Yeah.
saying that they were at a prison in the States and they had a lockdown. So although she was scheduled to go in, they told her she can't right now, so she went to a nearby museum, and this museum was filled with all of the things, and this was in Canada, by the way, a Canadian museum that was showed all of the ways that they tortured prisoners before, and she said this was as early as 1972. And this is really graphic, so trigger warning for everybody, including you, Marina. If you
Okay.
don't want to listen to this, I won't. But like they had a leather strap with a hole in the middle that they would use. They would tie the people down and hit them until the chunks of skin would come out. That was as early as the 1970s. And that's not a mental institution. And I know that they were even worse in mental institutions because I know what they did to my mom in the 80s here in Calgary. But
Oh,
that's a story for another time.
yeah. Well, see again too. When I talk about gender apartheid or gender, just like indigenous women, like just the crisis out there, people don't think like there's a crisis because, again, as soon as it's a trigger, like there's that trigger warning, it seems like colonial or white establishment just go, oh, no, no, no. They sort of hum away, none of my business, like
Yeah,
la di da. But yet,
as if they weren't the perpetrators.
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, this brings to mind when I was in residential school. Like I was always an advocate. I always spoke my mind, everything. And, I tried to get compensation for being psychologically abused for 2 years, and for speaking out. And the last year that I was there, they had forbid me from even leaving, well, we'll call it campus or the residence, because it was just a
yeah,
residence. We weren't going to school. They were bused into Portage. And so on the weekends, um, they had everybody else could go into this little town, do R&R, but for me, I had to stay in the residence for punishment for a whole school semester, a whole school year. On top of that, I used to belong to a glee club, and they banished me from singing with the glee club, which I think that year they went to Texas, so I wasn't allowed to even travel with them. But
wow.
but the way I could escape was there was a volunteer program for anybody who wanted to work. at a home for the mentally, like, at that time they called them retarded, which is
Yeah.
inappropriate. Like, just I I worked in cottages, and they were supposed to be progressive cottages. And so every weekend, I that was my escape, was to mix and, you know, observe and supervise, like, children,
Yeah.
and teenagers. And like, I'd feed them, clothe them, bathe them, whatever I needed to do. But I do remember them telling me the horror stories before they were moved into the cottages, where these children were put into just uh the hallway of a basement, in a dark hallway in a basement. Can you imagine that? And they're sitting, there's no activity, they're just sitting in the hallway. And the one teenager, I think she was 18, but she was in the teenage housing that I was looking after. She would sit, and she'd be just in, sort of like in comatose, or uh, we'll call it psychosis or something, and she'd be just mumbling, darkness, darkness, darkness. And I, to this day, like, when I think about, like, these, who took care of them, who cleansed them, who fed them in that hallway that was dark, like, just, and these are children, like, that were in the like, at the from in the in Portage, where their parents just didn't want to take care of them because they weren't, born with high IQs, or the ability to, function. It just, like, it was so disturbing,
Mm-hmm.
because I have, like, my one brother didn't talk until he was 5. There's some autism in my family, but, and I guess anything else with indigenous people, like, even my mother, um, like, when she went to residential school, I think they took her when she was 5. Just her fawning, like, she didn't want to say anything, cause any trouble, because she knew the consequences of, being vocal. So
Yeah.
so a lot of times, when I think, the majority of why I'm vocal is because my mother wasn't allowed that. My father
Yeah.
tried, and he was there was lateral violence towards him, but all this psychological, emotional abuse that, indigenous children went through, and then they become adults, and then again too, there's that lateral violence of jealousy. It
Mm-hmm.
I When I was, like, I say, when I was 8 and 10, my parents traveled to South America and India. And I'm a kid, I don't know nothing about jealousy.
Sure.
Don't know nothing about it, but the legacy within my parents. My mother spoke, she was literate in Sioux, she could read and write in Sioux. And this is
Yeah.
before anybody even thought about restoring languages and creating dictionaries. My like, the Sioux people were already had a dictionary in the mid 1800s. So,
Yeah.
the Sioux people were already quite advanced in maintaining and trying to retain their language. But that pride, like, it's just like, you have nothing to be proud of. And even,
Yeah.
like, too, in Sioux Valley, I think they're having, like, their 80th anniversary of the what Cheapy, that's the powwow.
Yeah.
They were doing powwow way before anybody in Alberta was. Like, it's just part of the culture, the
Yeah.
indigenous culture of the Sioux people. And people get annoyed for me when I say I'm from Sioux-Tinna, but my bloodline is Sioux. They're annoyed because, like, they think I'm not proud to be Sutin, and I'm going, no, I was raised, I didn't get married into Sutina, I was raised here. And even then, the lateral violence towards women who grew up here. See, that's the irony, I think, because, like I said, my podcast was talking about my childhood, or my life in Sutina, and just the amount of people who were listening to my podcast. Because the
Yeah.
reality of it is, like, a lot of the women who married into Sutina, they had more advantage than me, because, women like me, like my cousins, my own siblings, like, if you chose not to have a partner, then you don't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah. Exactly.
So a lot of times, uh, a lot of things that say, people in general would get. Oh my goodness. Oh, hold on, Michelle. I
No
gotta.
problem.
I don't know how I'm going to stop this here. Let's see if I can put it on pause.